Kia ora. Good morning. So I've just been yelling at someone on X, but it's triggered things that I had forgotten about, and it's something that I need to talk about because for all the people out there that think they know the occult, who think that they're very clever conspiracy theorists, I know there's a lot of stuff that conspiracy theorists have said that have been true. But there's people out there who go down a road in conspiracy theory that leads into the sort of occult that if these things are believed in the wrong minds, they become dangerous and fatalistic. And the person I was yelling at was basically implying that the reason why the royal family are vampires is because they're related to Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. And I've already been there, done that. I made the video about, the truth of Dracula and where it all came from and stuff like that. I'll put a link in the description box below, as well as me jumping to the king's defence. I basically said I've spent my entire life studying the occult, and there's nothing I don't know. I see things that nobody else knows. And I will challenge everybody with a counter argument and knock it out of the park every time, because people really don't understand the full spectrum of what the occult embodies. You have the paranormal side, you have the supernatural side. And when you're dealing with people who drink the blood and, the adrenochrome and do the sacrifices and all that sort of thing, they're trying to gain access to the supernatural because they think that what they're doing is supernatural, but it's not. It's the paranormal. The paranormal to me basically means the beliefs and consequences that are parallel to people's normal daily mindset. So these people that believe that the royal family are reptilian blood drinkers, devil worshippers, and all of that. And I was explaining about how I used to be one of those people. My ex-husband had me believing a lot of stuff until I became an occult scientist. And when I knew that I wanted to get my physics and that recognised as a science, and then, of course, I was forced to have to defend my science when I was locked up. And then the Queen started coming through in those codes. I had to take everything seriously because if I was going to go public and risk my life and my freedom and, my children and everything in order to defend the king and the royal family against what I saw coming in those codes, I needed to make sure that everything I thought I knew about them, like that all my ducks were in a row. And that everything that I was going to claim, should I go public and say, oh, hey, by the way, the dead queen is telling me these things and I need to get through to her son and blah, blah, blah. If I was going to do that, I needed to be able to produce the kind of evidence that would stand up in a court of law and stand up in the court of public opinion, because I knew once I spoke that two things were going to happen. They were either going to try and get me locked up again and have me arrested, which they have done. They've tried. And that I was going to need the backing and support of the public to say, oh my God, this is what the government's really doing. This is who Trump really is. This is who Musk really is, blah, blah, blah. We need to work together to take down these people, because the level of corruption isn't just to do with finances and that. It's sinister, it's evil, it's dealing with the sort of depravities that 90% of most people on the planet, if they're not involved in this way of life, if it's not part of their life, part of their work or their ministry, and that, they're not going to even know is going on. So, obviously when I find out information and things are backed up by other people and laws and that, I act. And I needed to make sure that if I was going to go public and risk the last little bit that I had, my dignity, my reputation, my little abode that has been filled up with donations and, you know, the respect of my kids and all that, if I was going to risk all of that, risk being locked up, being homeless, being destitute, all that sort of thing, I needed to make sure that when I present my facts and evidence on social media that I was factually correct. Because the stuff that I was claiming was a pretty big deal. So I'll put that argument in the description box, but the whole purpose for this video is to talk about the dark side of the occult. And I don't think people realise the sort of things that I've had to do. I was talking to my youngest son about this, like, maybe after I don't know if I was locked up or if it was after I got out. Some of the things that I've had to do in order to understand the occult, most people couldn't stomach. But I was born with this fascination of needing to understand human behaviour. I used to watch, when I was a kid, we were the first people in our neighbourhood to get a video player. And so my dad used to bring in all sorts of videos. And I remember one that stuck out in my head, stuck in my mind and my memory as a little kid, was the killing of America. And the stuff that I was witnessing on that video, I could not believe was real. And so then I've been asking questions ever since then. Why? Why do people do that? And I said to my son, there are some things that people do that I've tried to understand. Where does that come from? I know I've talked about it briefly on X and that sort of thing, and this whole Bubba situation with Donald Trump, people trying to figure out who Bubba was. Was it a horse? Was it Clinton? That sort of thing. And then I'm watching these videos because I've been saying, because we're going to be rescuing children from all sorts of situations, I've been watching videos on YouTube to try and desensitize me. And watching some of these videos, it's triggering memories of some of the things I've had to do in order to be the occult physicist that I am today, in order to protect the king and try and save children. For example, when my ex and I lived in Birmingham, we had neighbours, and our neighbour Roger worked for the police. He had like some big techie boffin job with computers, but one of the things he used to do was he used to help the police track down online pedophiles. He worked for Interpol and all of that as well, tracking online pedophiles, and he challenged me one night to see how easy it was for me to find the child P. And I literally just typed in a couple of words and all this stuff came up, and I was like, oh my God, what does that mean? And he said it means you'd be really good at hunting down the pedophiles. He said you could be really good at this. And that's when I was 28, 29. I'm 53 now. And then when my ex first took me to Inverness, the very first time he took me to Scotland, was it the very first time he took me to Scotland? Was it on our honeymoon? The very first time he took me to Inverness, he took me to Beliskin Cemetery, where my ancestors, the Fraser of Lovets, have a cemetery. When my mum died, I put a marble bench there, granite, I think it is, bench there, because my whole life my mum had always wanted to visit Scotland to see where her great-grandparents came from, and when she got my ex was waiting for a bonus from work, and we had decided that we were going to bring my mum over and take her up to Scotland to fulfill her dream. And just as we were about to contact her and say, hey, look, we're sending for you, we found out she was dying of cancer, so she never got to do that. So when I got my inheritance, the first thing I did was I commissioned a bench for her. So if you ever visit Beliskin Cemetery up in Inverness, you'll see the marble bench with Al McCallahan's little memorial plaque on it, and that was me, that's my mum. Because of the connection that my family cemetery has with Alistair Crowley, and his house being across the road, Beliskin House was across the road, and it was once owned by Led Zeppelin. Our family cemetery, because I know this because his name was Jeff Fridge, and he worked for the Inverness Council, and he's the one that helped me get the bench put up. And he was the one that was telling me about the problem that they have, especially around Easter time, with devil worshippers and occultists and that going to my family cemetery and doing rituals out there. The first time my ex took me, we've got it on camera, he will have it on tape, the old-fashioned tape, because remember, it's the olden days videos, it's not like today where you used your phone. And I had an encounter with Alistair Crowley, and he's got it all on tape, and it was the first time I ever probably did a jump. But he was there, and he was with a chimpanzee, and I investigated afterwards and found out that one of the things that he used to do in my family cemetery was they would have shrek in the family cemetery, and then just at the point of the big O, they would have shrek with animals in the cemetery, and in that house, and just at the point when they were about to have the big O, they would cut the throats of the animals and do the bloodletting and washing it and blah blah blah. So I was telling my son about some of the things that I've had to try and study, some of the things that I've had to look up, some of the things I've had to witness and watch in order to try and understand them, because when you're dealing with fighting with the occult, you need to understand the mindset of everybody who is part of that cult or part of their rituals, because a lot of devil worshipping, when like they have like an almanac, the devil worshipping almanac, they call it Satan's diary, but it's not Satan at all, like in any way, shape or form. And one of the things that is required of them is to perform acts of bestiality, which is why I was saying about, because Ghislaine Maxwell had a horse called Bubba. And when that whole Donald Trump Bubba thing was going on, I was wondering whether it was Ghislaine Maxwell's horse. But then, of course, the photos have come out that I put up on my thing of Trump and Clinton, and it looks like Bubba is Clinton. But some of the things that I had completely forgotten about it too, but I was watching a video of this woman who was arrested for doing things to her dog, and I was like, oh my God, I can remember when and what are the other ones, necrophilia, I haven't been able to, it's not that I've tried to find excuses as to why these people would have these fetishes, it's that I said to my son, because he said, where do you think it comes from? And I said, I've spent my whole life trying to figure it out. And I said, it's not that I found excuses for some of them. There are some things that I've like really stretched the rubber band as far as it can go to try and figure out, well, maybe they do this because it's a genetic memory thing from when we were animals. Because we share the DNA with everything from obviously apes to pigs to dogs to bananas and herbs, and if it's got minerals and gases in it, we're going to share some form of genetic memory with it. So I was thinking, well, maybe it's because like there's a part of them that remembers when they were that animal. But when I looked it up, honestly, when I did the research, it looked like it was more people doing it in order to please their partners. And that's what this case was that I was just watching on YouTube. I can put a link in the description box below, but if you're sensitive, don't watch it. I may have deleted it. Oh no, I'll have a look. But and then with pedophilia, it's like, okay, well, we used to be from a culture where we had to marry young because our life expectancy was around about 30 years old. So at one point in our history, we had to marry young because, getting married at 10 back then was the equivalent of getting married at 22 now, sort of thing, because of the life expectancy thing. And I'm not making excuses for it, but it's trying to understand the mindset of the people who do these things. I've had to cannibalism I can understand because I'm Polynesian and my ancestors were cannibals. And back in the day, even from the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Druids and the pagans and all of that, it was very common to eat the heart and flesh of people because they had this messed up mindset of thinking that, if I know with my ancestors in particular as well, that when you ate their heart, you ate their spirit, you controlled their spirit, and when you ate their brain, you gained their strength and their knowledge, which is why in my indigenous culture especially, we only went after chieftains and the warriors and the most noble and the ones who were feared and the ones who had the most respect in the enemy's tribes and that sort of thing, because then we thought we get to absorb all of that and take it on ourselves and embody it ourselves. But we are, and it's the same way with, your Druids and pagans and Aztecs and all that as well. But then they would sacrifice children in particular, because when I was talking about the sin eaters on X, they would take on the child's purity because they had committed sins. And so they project their sins and their karma onto the pure and innocent, which is why they sacrifice children, virgins and animals, so that because they believed that those victims, those sacrifices would then, they'd transfer their sins and their karma onto the sacrifice. So I kind of had more of an understanding of that as someone my ancestors were cannibals right up until the end of World War II. It was after World War II that my ancestors stopped eating people. And then because we all know about the people from Papua New Guinea and, what we now know to be mad cow's disease and all that sort of thing. And then necrophilia, that's the only one I can't understand. I've tried every which way. I've studied it, I've watched videos, like with all the others, I've studied it, I've looked through history books, I've gone through websites online, I've looked at videos. I can't understand necrophilia. I cannot for the life of me figure out what part of the human psyche, even going all the way back to, the dawn of time, why people do it. And it is a practice, it is a very common practice that people in a lot of cults do. And I can't understand why, because from an occult perspective, it makes no sense. I know grave robbing in the occult sense, they'll use their bones and organs and that for rituals and for jewellery and, because they believe that it gives them power over the underworld and all that sort of thing. But the necrophilia is the only thing where, even stretching my logical rubber band as far as it can go, I haven't been able to figure out, when you go back to time immemorial, where that comes from. It's one of those questions that it's a question mark that's been over my head since I was too short to see over the dinner table to figure out why my sister was able to shapeshift. I literally watched my teenage sister go from being a teenager to an old woman and how the hell did she do that? Even at, I would have been 4, maybe 5 years old. I remember it as clear as day. It was a Sunday. There was my 3 older sisters, Marion, Paula and Laurie. My sister Erin was there. I think my brother John was there, but I'm pretty sure that my cousin Michelle was there as well. But it was a Sunday night, and they were in the kitchen, and we were standing around the dinner table, and they were doing like a seance thing. They were standing in like a circle. My 3 sisters were, the power of 3. My sister, us younger kids weren't allowed to be involved, but we were allowed to watch. And my older sister, Marion, the oldest of us 7, she went from looking like a teenager to, I think she had just come back from the United Kingdom as well, doing her big overseas adventure. She signed up to some work program where you got to travel the world and do things like, she worked on a pig farm in Germany, I think it was. She worked in hotels. She was a nanny. She was she worked at oh God, I can't remember the name of the hotel in Edinburgh, but she babysat for Sean Connery and cleaned the room of the Bay City Rollers. My ex took me to show me the hotel. I can't remember the name of it, but she babysat for Sean Connery. She knocked on the door. He opened the door. He was wearing a towel. This is at the height of his James Bond. This is when he was James Bond, when he was young. And when she realised who he was, she panicked. And he said, he stood there looking at her and he said, can I help you? She said, I've come to change your nuts. And he laughed so hard that he actually requested that she be the babysitter for his kids. And she said that his son Jason was an asshole. And the Bay City Rollers, she said, were just filthy, dirty. They were animals. So, yeah, so she'd brought stuff back that she'd learned from the United Kingdom, and she was showing us. And I watched her face change. She went from being a teenage girl to this old woman. And that triggered in me, plus the stuff that my dad was experiencing in the house we were living in Alexander Street. Plus with me and my best friend almost being kidnapped by pedophiles the very day we learned about stranger danger at school, that triggered everything that I am now. Why? How did that happen? Why did that happen? My video that I made about the music box when we went to Whakarewarewa, I was talking to my sister about it a few months ago, and she's like, oh my God, I remember that. You know, I was born needing to know why. Why? How? And so little did I know it was going to turn me into an occult physicist, where now when people come along and say things like, well, the reason why King Charles is a vampire is because he's related to Vlad Tepes. Well, my ancestors were cannibals, even up until only like 70, 80 years ago, but I don't eat human flesh. Like, what's that got to do with anything? I said to the person, I reminded them, I said, King Charles is also related to Jesus Christ through King David as well. But, you know, some of these conspiracy theorists go down a path that is not only mentally unstable, but it's dangerous, because then other people pick it up and they run with it. So, as I was explaining in my post, I've spent my entire life studying the deepest, darkest, most depraved parts of human existence in order to be able to understand why. And when you understand why, you know how. And I have to know how to counteract and counter-argue and cut things off before they get to breaking point in a society that tips people the wrong way. And we are trying to, like people like King Charles and Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin knows the same sort of stuff I do. The only thing is, he confuses Satan with the devil. He confuses Satan with Lucifer and Molech and Baphomet and Baal. Although he does know who Baphomet is, he thinks Baphomet is Satan, and he's not. Once he understands that Satan has nothing to do with the devils other than the fact that they bring him contracts to cash in on, then his knowledge is pretty decent. Like, you know, he understands about the cannibals of, you know, the Western elites and Baphomet and the sacrifices in adrenochrome and all that sort of thing. He knows it as well as I do, which is why I say he's my work husband, because he is the perfect world leader, the perfect companion to me to help protect the king. Because ever since Starmer got in, ever since they started putting all the players on their game of chess to play to bring down the monarchy, they started ramping up the whole, you know, like I said, why is it only Prince Andrew that's been publicly dragged through the mud with the Epstein thing, when I've been able to prove that he was set up? Why has nobody else been held accountable? Why is all the conspiracy theory stuff only coming out about the king and the royal family? Because it's targeted, it's done on purpose. And one of the things that Donald Trump said when he put his Q thing up to say about, you know, how do you get to the king by removing the queen and yada yada and all that, and he was talking about his board and public opinion, using public opinion to win the game of chess. And this was during his state visit, and I said to the king, they're getting ready to start destroying your reputation so that people have reason to get rid of you and become a republic. And then once they do that, they'll sell off the Commonwealth and that as well, because they'll have no one to defend them. But the king is up against human traffickers and organ harvesters and grooming gangs within his own government, within his own parliament. But the only two people in the entire world that could see it for what it is Vladimir Putin and I. So him and I have been working together to protect the king from his own government, from his own parliament, because they've, not all of them, obviously, not every single one of them, but the majority of them, especially in the Labour Party, and there's been a handful of Conservatives in that, going back to Tony Blair, who have been strategically playing this very slow Fabian Society game of theirs in order to lull the royal family into a false sense of security, so that when they were ready, once Starmer grew up and they were ready to put him into position, bearing in mind he was mentored by Jimmy Savile at a very young age. Jimmy Savile is the whole reason why Keir Starmer knows Jeffrey Epstein. It's evidential fact. It's all fact. And now that this stuff's come out about Kevin Spacey recording Miliband and Ed Miliband and Starmer abusing girls and trans kids, with Kevin Spacey doing the recording, and I've been able to link photos with Ghislaine Maxwell and Spacey and all that at Buckingham Palace, and I've presented this case to the king. He's realised, he's starting to wake up and realise that whole thing with Venezuela and the Bella One and the 170 kids going missing and all of that right on the king's waters. And now, it's come out about Greenland is a massive producer of adrenochrome, and they have a huge problem, just like I found out with Norway and Iceland, with child trafficking and children going missing in that. So now we know why Trump is hell-bent on getting Greenland, and, while they're trying to protect Greenland and that, because it's all because you make a lot of money from adrenochrome, and you make even more money harvesting organs. And Vladimir Putin and I are the only two people that could see what they were doing and understand why they're making the moves they are. But of course, when we tried to speak out, they declared war on us, and they're trying to still declare war. And so him and I have had to energetically work together, whether he knows it or not, to protect the king, because the king, Vladimir Putin and I, we stand strong in our defiance. When we're the sort of people, when we see the truth about something, we will not back down from defending it, because we understand the importance of protecting the next generations, because they are our future. And the way the current systems are running in these countries at the moment, with what I call the coalition of Epsteiners, which is everybody who's up against the king and Russia, and, you know, with Ukraine being the fodder for it all your NATO nations and all of that, we see it for what it is, and we are standing in defiance to stop it from happening, because if they get their hands on the king, our children will never have a future until we get to the point in history in the future where people are starting to come up into power that do away with it. Just like, you know, how after everyone was put through hell in Germany with the rise of Hitler and, you know, the Nazis and all that, and everybody thought this was how it was going to be forever, like Pol Pot, all of them. People thought this was how it was going to be forever until new people came into power and took the bad ones away, like Idi Amin and all of that. So Vladimir Putin and I, that's why I say we're the ones who are protecting the king, because we see it for what it really is. We know who these people really are and what they're doing behind the scenes. But I've had to get my facts straight before I presented my case to the king and the ICC in regards to the royal family and defending their honour and Vladimir's honour, because they tried to say he was a pedophile as well. I looked it up. I found nothing other than one accusation that guy that they poisoned in London said that he saw him doing, and it was like one thing, and that was it. And it was like, that's like, you know, whereas like with Donald Trump, there's whole files of proof and evidence. But this one thing that was said about Vladimir Putin was based on one person's opinion on what he saw, and then he ended up being poisoned. And they tried to say that Russia was the one that poisoned him. But when I looked into it, it looks like it was MI5. So that they could blame it on Russia. Because like I've been saying, they've been desperate to go after Russia since Queen Victoria. Because they need to get rid of the royal families. They need to get rid of the royal bloodline. And Vladimir Putin is related to King Charles through Prince Philip. And I'm related to King Charles through Robert the Bruce. I don't know if I'm related to Vladimir Putin, but both Vladimir Putin and I are related to the king. And we're the two that are protecting the king. We're standing between the king and the people out to get him. And when I started speaking out, and after Starmer got in and I started figuring it all out, and especially after Trump came to his visit, man, they started ramping up the conspiracy theory stuff about the royal family like you wouldn't believe. And the things that they've been accused of. And unfortunately, I had to be armed with all this knowledge. So if people say, oh, they did things with animals, or they do things with dead bodies because of this, that, and the other, I can say, well, actually, the real reason why devil worshippers do this is blah, blah, blah. You know, and then I can counter-argue. Because these conspiracy theorists will believe everything that's put out there. And there are so many people who are being paid to spread the lies that you kind of have to sift through the chaff. You know, so sift through the wheat for the chaff. Sift through the chaff for the wheat in order to be able to see the truth for what it is. And because I'm trying to get my field of physics, quantum magnetics, recognised as a legitimate science, where it can be put in, you know, science journals and that sort of thing, I have to be tight with my knowledge. And because what I am is based on doing investigations and finding evidence and understanding the hidden meanings, which is what the occult means, secrets of the knowledge of the hidden, because I have to find the hidden meanings behind things. Psychology and human behavior is a huge part of what I do. So I've had to sit and watch things and investigate things and listen to people talk about things that no normal person who didn't have an eye and stomach, but there's some things that even make me want to go, bleh. But it's the same, like watching these cops having to arrest this woman that did what she did with her dog for her husband. I sometimes watch these police officers and that, and I think, like, how do they act so normal when they're arresting them? The woman, the woman that was setting up the arrest of the perp was acting so friendly, and I know they're probably trained to, it doesn't matter what you're witnessing, and that stay calm and make the person you're arresting feel like you're on their side and that sort of thing. I don't know if I could do that. But like, there are people that have those sort of jobs, like the cops and like what I do for the sake of trying to rescue children and removing all the bad people who are doing these things in society for the name of devil worshipping and the occult and all that, where you can't react. You have to put personal feelings aside, because it can hinder your investigation and your assessment, and you cannot get a single thing wrong when it comes to the occult. And because I use my knowledge to manifest, quantum magnetics is manipulating time to manifest reality, and I have access to the creation frequency as well as the underworld. I'm a high priestess, so I'm like the bridge between life and death and the conscious universe and all of that. I can't get a single thing wrong. Everything that I manifest, everything I put out, even though I'm allowed to make spelling mistakes and grammatical errors, because I kind of do automatic writing when I type, and I don't have time to spell check or anything, so I will make spelling mistakes and grammatical errors, but it's the energy behind the information, and it's the facts behind the information, not the spelling, that is important. And I can't get anything wrong. It has to be pitch perfect. Otherwise, if anyone tries to use my information to defend themselves in court, or they're using my information to defend other people in public or defend themselves in public, if it gets referenced back to me, I can't be factually incorrect, because other people are relying on me to have my facts right. Not only that, it's also about, my reputation as well. I don't want to be laughed out of the scientific world, because they're like, what the hell is she talking about? She got that wrong and this wrong and blah, blah, blah. And I've had to stand in my truth to defend my science, because I've had doctors and cops and lawyers and scientists and they're all over the place scratch their heads and think, what the hell she's talking about, because, like, I'm the first of my kind. And so what I say goes over their heads, because they don't know how to incorporate the occult, psychology, philosophy, theology, evolutionary theorism, the paranormal, faith, all of that into my physics, indigeny, genetic memory. It's all part of the ingredients that makes up my physics. So anyone who thinks they're high and mighty and more superior than me in knowledge because they've got degrees and highfalutin jobs and that sort of thing, they were quick to judge without sitting and actually looking at my work. But I do have to admit that my work would never have made sense to anyone until the code started dropping in alignment with reality, until everything that I was seeing in the existence of time was dropping into the codes of physical reality. So basically, none of what I was saying would have made sense until it was proven that Keir Starmer was going after the king. And now they're like, oh my God, she's telling the truth. Donald Trump really is this. They really do that. That really is happening. She was telling the truth when she said Labour are covering up grooming gangs, because they are the grooming gangs. You know? So, yeah. So, the stuff I have had to investigate, the things I've had to stomach, the things I've had to witness ever since I was a little girl probably would have messed up the minds of most people by the time they were kids. However, the other thing you need to understand is that a lot of these kids that come to me when I open my school dabble in the occult. It is very, very normal. It's just natural, instinctual human curiosity to want to dabble. And it all starts with things like Ouija boards and doing seances. But they don't understand the danger of it and the pitfalls that come with it. But as an occult scientist, as an occult physicist, I do. And I've got videos where I'm saying the truth, that I've made about, I'll put them in the description box, about, the dangers of Ouija boards and seances. Because that's in the realms of the paranormal. And most teenagers, well, not most teenagers, all teenagers are going through a transformation on a hormonal chemical level where even the chemical components of their brain is changing. They're going through a metamorphosis at a time when they're dabbling in things that they don't know anything about, that ends up making them experience poltergeist activity, have paranormal episodes, dissension psychosis. They get accused of having schizophrenia and mental breakdowns and stuff because they've gone into realms of the occult that they're not psychologically, chemically, or hormonally prepared to understand. So God created me. So when they come to me and they start telling these stories, and we're writing all, my horror movies and doing my Halloween stuff and that, and we're talking about these experiences at the Amber Wilkinson School of Witchcraft and all of that, I can show them and explain to them. And then they'll know to avoid these things. They'll know how to fix these things, and they'll know what to do if they experience it, in the outside world with their friends and siblings and all that, So learning is knowledge, knowledge is wisdom, wisdom is power. And I've had to learn some things in order to teach everyone so that they don't have to do the sort of things that I've had to do. When I sat there and brought up that stuff on Roger's computer, my stomach hit the floor. I said to him, does that make me a pedophile? He said, if you were looking at the stuff on your computer and I was investigating you, I would think you were a pedophile. He said, you found that stuff really easy. And I got emotional, like I started to cry, and I said, what does that mean? He said, it means that you should be doing this for a job. And I was like, I don't know how to work computers. I'm about as technical as a bloody spoon. But I have the investigator's mind, and now as a result, I'm using all of that, not realising back then he was helping set the stage for what I am now, in order to be able to protect people like the King and hopefully save these children. So that's all I care about, saving the children. I'll go through whatever means necessary to get to the end result of saving children, keeping them safe, helping build societies where looking after our children, the future generations, is paramount. So I'll put links in the description box below. You'll see me ranting. You'll see my videos. I'll put the one up about Dracula. I'll put the one up about Ouija boards and all of that. But I've got a whole slew of information there now that I'm turning into a writing video game movie musical entertainment empire, because it's going to be, I'm using fun and entertainment in order to teach the world about the things that a lot of people refuse to look at. Like my musical, Night of the Black Sun. It's about the zombie apocalypse, COVID and all that, but it's to raise awareness for child trafficking. So it's going to force people to look at the issue in a way where, yeah, we're going to be a musical performing on stage and broadcasting it, across the airwaves and all that, but we're also going to be sending a message about how, hopefully, fingers crossed, how the King and Vladimir Putin and I banded together to fight the darkest forces in positions of power in order to save the children, with all three of us taking massive hits to our reputation and suffering financial losses and all of that in order to be able to do it. And I will stand up and I will defend the King, and I will say, don't anyone dare try and say that the Queen is this or that the King is that, because I've investigated this within an inch of my life. I started out as a non-believer and now I'm a believer, and here are the answers. And before you open your trap and accuse him and his family of being this, that and the other, look at my evidence, because he's not the bad guy. After all, it's his governments, it's his mother's governments. They were the bad ones. They were putting out what they wanted you to see, while making sure that the people like me and Vladimir Putin and that who were actually trying to put the truth out there were being silenced. So, yeah, the dark side of the occult. But then there's the good side of the occult, and that is when your mind expands and opens up and you see the truth and you have your enlightenment. You go through the rapture. You go through a mass spiritual awakening. And when you go through the rapture and you're standing in the enlightenment of truth, it frees you from the shackles of lies and misinformation and propaganda and, government control and, all the things that we were taught in school and in history and on the news and that, like it being a lie. Once you see the lies, once you see through the veil and the matrix is removed, you can never go back to the old ways of believing. Now that I know the truth about the Queen and her family and that, I can never ever, in all good consciousness and the full awareness of God's truth, ever believe that they were what the conspiracy theorists are saying they are, because once you see the truth, it can't be denied anymore. And once your mind is open and you go through that evolutionary expansion and divine salvation sort of thing, you can't come back down once you've risen. You'd have to commit sins in order to go back down. And when you get to the point where you're rising, where you're going through the rapture, you can't ever go back down. You just want to keep rising because it's so fantastic up there. You get to, when you, the 7 stages of an ascension, the 6th stage is the ethers. And when you're in the ether stage of your ascension, that's when you're getting to know your ancestors and meeting up with your loved ones on the other side through dreams and signs and synchronicities and that, where they're giving you advice and offering you support and that from, out in the ethers that you would never have gotten when you were still down there. And it's like, why would you want to step away from being able to have the love and support from my baby girl that I just lost and my mum, and Queen Elizabeth and all that, and they're not dead, they're not ghosts, it's just you're tapping into their conscious memory, where we're able to communicate with each other through conscious memory. Why would you want to step away from all of that? I wouldn't give up 1 second of being in Amber's presence in my dreams or through a sign and synchronicity to go back to, when I had my radio show, when I thought that I was about to break through and be at the top of my career and, you know, be this new thing on radio and that, I would rather have 1 second of being with my Amber than reliving the incredible experience of having my radio show in Chicago. So you take the good, you take the bad. Hear people singing the song to Facts of Life. There's good and bad in everything, and I have to present the good and bad in the occult. And this video is about the bad things that I've had to witness and study and investigate, and oh boy, I forget about these things until I watch these videos where I'm trying to desensitize myself, because I don't want to be shocked by anything that comes, you know, any case or child that comes through my gates. I don't want to be shocked by anything, because I've had so many years where I've, you know, found out things or had to see things or witness things or things that have been brought to me that used to leave me in a puddle of tears for days. My boys will be able to tell you, when I was first doing my blog and, you know, working with my boys in the military and law enforcement, they were bringing me things, and I was getting, you know, delving deep into the whole child trafficking, grooming, organ harvesting sort of thing back in 2016-17, Frazzled Rip, Rachel Chandler, all of that. It was a lot for me to handle. I used to cry constantly. My boys, you know, the kids used to come, the boys knew the kids. I've got all the videos, you know, it's all there, because I had to document it all, knowing that one day I was going to have to be used to present everything I was recording and documenting in order to defend my science and my faith. Because my teacher and the ancient prophecy said that's what was going to happen. People would try and kill me, and they would do everything they could in their power to stop me from taking my position in the prophecy. The girl from the islands with bare feet, coming, you know, bringing the four corners of the globe together for the world of, you know, for the sake of world peace. White buffalo calf woman, whale rider, take your pick. I'm everywhere. I'm in the Bible. I'm on cave paintings. They've all known. So, yeah. Which is why I get so offended when people like Donald Trump steal my movies, and people like Chris and his little cult stole my oils and all of that, because they don't know what the hell I've had to go through in order to perfect my craft. The things that I've had to watch and witness and study and investigate within an inch of its life that would mentally scar the average person, just to stand here today to defend my king and protect the children and expose people like Starmer and Trump and Musk and Miliband and Gates and all of that. The stuff I've had to go through, and then they think, oh, I'll just copy her. Oh, I'll just do it like she does. Oh, I'll just take her thing. I'm just going to copy her book and nick her this, and, you know, and it's just like, you have no idea. Walk a mile in my investigative shoes, and you'd be taking yourself to that hospital. I had to toughen up. I wore my heart on my sleeve my whole life. My mother said, you wear your heart on your sleeve and you let everyone take a bite. Not now, because I had to toughen up. Because I can't be a crying, blithering heap when these kids turn up that have come from, you know, being rescued from tunnels. And because you have to understand as well that a lot of these children don't have parents. They're not registered, you know, with birth certificates and that, because they're born to be bred for sacrifices and to be slaves. So they'll kidnap men and women, boys and girls, to breed with them so that they can take the babies and do things to the babies. And they're not registered. Nobody knows they exist. They'll let these kids get to a certain age, or if they're the right genetics, they'll then wait till they get to an age where they can breed with them as well. Work on their eugenics to find the perfect human with the whole cloning and all of that. And yeah, it's just pure evil. And Vladimir Putin and I are the only two that have had the guts and the balls big enough to speak out about it. And in turn, they then targeted us. But if we stand together, and we're standing together, we can protect the king. And I just need the king to wake up. Once I know Starmer's been arrested and he's dissolved Parliament, that he's shutting it all down, then I can relax. But until then, I'm patrolling his perimeter energetically with my sword and shield, with my, my staff and my hand of my crystal ball in my hand. Whether I'm a knight or a wizard. Well, not a wizard, Jesus, not... Take that back. An alchemist. I'm way more higher ranking than a wizard. Good Lord. Yeah, whether I'm a knight defending the parameters of my king's castle, or whether I'm an alchemist standing with my crystal ball and my staff. Whatever I have to be, I'll do it, because if they succeed in taking him down, all hope is lost. So that's why Vladimir Putin and I are defending King Charles and Great Britain within an inch of our lives. People have no idea what him and I have sacrificed, the losses we've made. But the king is now facing the same thing. Now he's starting to get it. They killed off members of my family. They killed off members of the king's family. Vladimir Putin lost baby brothers, all at the hands of the same evil powers, the Illuminati, and people have lumped King Charles into the same cauldron, and his mother and his mother's family, his mother's children and grandchildren, and that don't deserve to be a part of that. It was all done by design. They've been set up since the reign of Queen Victoria to go down with, Darvo being accused of the things they're guilty of. So, yeah. Right, so I'm going to go. I wanted to talk about that, because watching these videos, it made me remember things. I think it's because I'm taking these mushroom vitamins. It's opened portals and memories in my mind that I'd completely forgotten about, that took me right back to my childhood, that tells the story of what created me, and the blood, sweat and tears and losses that I've had to sacrifice and endure to get to this point, in order to save the king and wake everybody up. Because we can't let Starmer, we can't let Labour continue the way they're going, or they're going to start eating our children and selling our children off and putting them in cargo ships to haul them across to people that are chomping at the bit to do very, very bad things to them over my immortal dead body. So, anyway, I'm going to go. I shall speak to you later. Ka kite anō. Mwah.